Feel free to drop some stuff into my bag.
I have made it with a woman. Inform the men.
In June 2018, the world was first told about Starfield, and the day has finally come. After years of teasers, previews, and Xbox Showcase events, Starfield has been released. However, is the skybox the limit, or is it to infinity and beyond? Now, this won't be a traditional review. Mind you, what is a traditional review on this channel anyways? But it's more of my thoughts also with about 20 hours of gameplay in Starfield. And like Skyrim and Fallout before it, Starfield will take months, if not years, for players to discover everything and find all the Easter eggs and the dope weapons and such. But with my time with it so far, I gotta say I am impressed with Starfield.
That's good.
But I also found myself getting bored at the same time, but I'll get into that.
Ooh, that's bad.
It's also worth noting, for most of my game reviews, including Starfield, I'll watch the initial trailer reveal, but when a large hype game has 1001 different Let's Play videos and such, I'll completely skip them as I prefer to boot up a game a bit blind to have my initial reactions, impressions and reviews as fair as I can.
I lost my train of thought.
Developed and published by Bethesda Game Studio, Starfield is the newest franchise release in Bethesda's game library alongside Fallout and the Elder Scrolls series. Now, rather than surviving in a nuclear fallout whilst listening to some bangin' tunes, or fighting dragons and taking an arrow to the knee, Starfield has us explore space and do whatever we want at our own pace. If you've played the Fallout series or Skyrim before, the introduction will be a little similar, with the comfortable opening introducing us to some characters, some combat, some space exploration before being given the option to do whatever we want to do in this galaxy. Now, you start off as a miner on a planet before we find a mysterious artifact and we faint, and that's all I'm going to get into with the core story of the game to avoid spoilers. But from here we wake up in a haze, we create our own character, and just like you'd expect in a Bethesda RPG, right away I couldn't help but notice how impressive graphically Starfield was. Fallout and Skyrim, whilst yes they're good games, they always looked kinda murky in its graphics, and I was shocked with how good this game looks straight out of the bat. Now, unlike Fallout and Skyrim, where we would just create our character, here in Starfield we're not only picking characteristics, but we're choosing our character's backstory, which affects the gameplay.
Let's see. Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. I'd like some of that.
For example, you can have your character start the game by owning a house, but you lose money weekly until the house is paid off. Or you can make yourself a Malcolm Reynolds Han Solo and be wanted by pirates and bounty hunters, which spawns in randomly during the game and they chase you down throughout your playthrough.
Hang on, son, we'll move into the asteroid field. And we'll have a couple of surprises for you.
Certain choices too can give you more health and perks, which tie into your character's progression and the standard upgrade tree that you get in these Bethesda games. For example, if you make your character an introvert, you'll get a buff when you play the game without any companions, and vice versa if you play as an extrovert. But being a Bethesda RPG, as you'd expect, there is a leveling up system with various different talent trees. Combat perks will increase proficiency with weapons, fitness perks will increase your health or how much gear that you can carry, and each perk can be leveled up a bit multiple times to give you sort of greater buffs. Now, as I had a mental image of making my character a bit like, say, a Cad Bane style of badass, but it's bald with a beard, so it was kinda me, I put a lot of my skills into pistols, and I also love a good shotgun. But speaking of gear, the loot and inventory system is very similar to previous Bethesda RPGs, but it's also a bit less involved. There aren't options for boots and pants and chest pieces. Instead, you'll have the option for what spacesuit and what helmet do you want to wear, and then what outfit and what hat you want to wear when you're not in your spacesuit. The core combat for Starfield is split into two, ground combat and space combat. And ground combat is very similar to Fallout, being a shooter, but you don't have a Pip-Boy, so you can't sort of do that stop, slow down time sort of thing. But there are options to use melee weapons if you want to get in close for your own preferred playstyle. There are also a variety of different weapons and types with the standard penetrating bullet type, but it wouldn't be a space exploration game without a couple of lasers as well. Now, the ground combat is smooth and polished, but it isn't overly something new.
Really? What's it like?
Now, your spaceship with its exploration and combat is completely different for one of these kinds of games. You'll start your adventures in a somewhat decent-ish ship that looks a bit like an ant merged with the Serenity from Firefly. Now, the game will introduce you to flight controls, and before you know it, you're facing off against pirates and you can potentially smuggle cargo, if that's the route you want to go down.
Casual hello, it's me, Zoidberg, act naturally.
Now, space combat is a little similar to that of Star Wars Squadrons, where you can divert power from your reactor to relevant areas of your ship. If you want to fly faster, you can pull power from your weapons, put it into your engines, and then when you're in combat, you might want to pull power from your engines or your gravity drive, which is a bit like a hyperdrive from Star Wars, put it into your shields and to your weapons.
Ah, she's built like a steakhouse, but she handles like a bistro.
Now, to deal damage to enemy ships, you need to lower their shields by using your ship's lasers, and then once their shields are down, use rockets or more powerful weapons and it will damage the enemy's hull. But there are two options when it comes to wrapping up combat. You can just blow up the ship and loot any hard resources from there, or you can do what the Empire did to the blockade runner in A New Hope and board the enemy ship and look for something on the inside of the ship while you're fighting off against any crew.
You're under arrest. Prepare to be boarded again and again.
Now, your ship is your mobile base or your mobile home, depending on how you want to play the game, and there is customization options and a load of options to do whatever the hell you want to do with your ship. When landing in cities, you can speak to the sort of ship mechanic for the city to repair your ship if you've taken any damage. You can purchase new ships, which, yes, you can own multiple ships, or you can modify your ship. And the ship builder does take a moment or two to get accustomed to the controls, but the options to create your own ship are very impressive. You'll need certain parts in order for your ship to fly and get off the ground, and thankfully the ship builder will tell you when you're missing certain items or if there's any errors with your build.
This one goes there, that one goes there, right?
Now, there is outpost building in the game, but as I've mentioned, I've only put about 20 hours of it or so into the game, and I never really get into base building. Even with games like Fallout, I couldn't really get into it. But it does go to show you that Starfield has this mechanic, and that if it's not overly your jam, then you don't overly need to worry about it or manage it too much, which is kind of a godsend for these kind of games. But, going back to making a ship, it's worth noting you won't have access to every ship part from the start of the game. So you can't make the Millennium Falcon at the start, but trust me, you can make it later on. With each planet that has its own shipyard or city, or well, if it's not in the middle of nowhere, allows you to speak to the shipmaster to buy parts, repair your ship, or buy new ships if you want to skip the building part, and each shipmaster will have different parts on different planets with different stock, so you can travel from planet to planet slowly building your Millennium Falcon or your Planet Express ship or whatever it is you want to make.
She's a beautiful ship, all right. Shapely, seductive. I'm gonna fly her brains out.
But if shipbuilding isn't for you, for whatever reason, the shipbuilder lets you simply just upgrade the existing parts on your ship. Like, you can just upgrade the engines, you can upgrade the storage compartment for cargo, you can upgrade your fuel and your shields and your weapons without really having to customize much to the ship at all, really. Now, just like in, well, Fallout and Skyrim, Starfield can be played in either first person or third person, and both view modes have a high quality of polish. Where previously it felt like Skyrim and Fallout should be played in first person, because the character's movement in third person and the graphics with clothing and such, they looked like crap. But here in Starfield, to my surprise, the third person view actually looked pretty good, and clothes moved rather than being stuck to your legs, which is a small personal annoyance for me. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, when you start your adventures, you'll be in an underground cave mining for materials before you go outside and you see ships arrive in the planet's atmosphere. And I have to say, again, graphically and sound design, I was pretty impressed. I'm not gonna lie. We're given a simple pirate shootout scene at the start of the game, and when I heard ships coming through the atmosphere, I could look up and see the ships coming down, and playing this game with a decent set of headphones on, you can easily immerse yourself into the game a bit more. The overall graphics atmosphere in the game has a bit of an Aliens vibe to it, or well, from a gaming perspective, Alien Isolation, where you can sort of hear the computer clicking noises that you get in those sort of old school 70s sci-fi movies, and again I thought this was pretty cool.
Okay, let's see what we've got.
Now, NPC interactions are pulled straight from Fallout and Skyrim, where the camera will zoom into the NPC's face and they'll be staring straight into your soul. However, NPC animations during dialogue feel a bit more natural with its updated visuals and facial animations, and they feel more realistic, though they still feel a bit more static in some instances.
Afraid your information is a couple years out of date.
Some characters' faces sure look awesome, but the NPCs just sort of seem to stand there, and they don't really feel animated while their face is animated. They sort of just turn their heads and their shoulders move, and that's really about it. Well, it would have been cool in some instances, like if you're chatting with them, like say a bartender in a popular bar, he doesn't even look up at you, he just expects you to order a drink. Or when you're talking to someone who's reading a book, they put the book down, or close the book, rather than just sort of pivot in your direction. Basically, the faces are really animated, but the NPCs' bodies are slightly tweaked when it comes to conversations, at least in my opinion. Now, there are some things worth noting though, that if you're keen to explore the stars. If you've played No Man's Sky before, it's worth noting the exploration and travel is a bit different. When leaving a planet, a cutscene will play with you flying off the planet and entering into orbit around the planet. And it's a bit of a bummer, especially when you fly from one planet to another and you arrive in another planet's sort of space system, and then you have to sort of open the menus, select you want to land on the planet, rather than flying down onto the planet yourself and landing the ship yourself, like you can in No Man's Sky. When moving from system to system, it's sadly a cutscene too. For example, if you move from Mars to Earth's moon, a small loading screen will appear. What is cool though is if you're flying in first person in the cockpit or third person, the cutscene will be a little different, which I thought was a nice touch. It is a bit of a bummer that you won't be flying through a planet's atmosphere and physically landing on the ship or activating the hyperdrive like you can in No Man's Sky, but it's just something to note personally. Thankfully though, the fast travel system for the game is a godsend, and you won't need to go from multiple loading screens to flying your ship. So, for example, you can fast travel from a city to another city on another planet in another solar system. So if you want to go from one sort of Western style city planet to a over-the-top Mass Effect style city, you can just fast travel there straight away. You don't need to leave the planet, then fly to the other planet, and then have another cutscene to land on that planet. You can immediately just fast travel to that planet. Kinda cool. It's also cool that when you arrive with a system that is governed or policed, your ship will be scanned for contraband and smuggling, and yeah, you can be a smuggler if you want to.
Got any fruits or vegetables?
But as I mentioned at the start of the video, I did find myself getting a bit bored with some of its story missions and gameplay. A few of the missions, so to speak, is to go and speak to this person and then they'll show you who you need to speak to. So you have to slowly follow them as they walk around to another room and another dialogue cutscene takes place.
You dug up the artifact, right?
Oh!
Oh, hey, it's you.
Oh!
Follow me.
And yeah, the same can be said for Fallout and Skyrim and all these sort of types of RPG games, but at least from my memory, these felt a bit spread out, where here the first few missions, at least in the first 20 hours that I've played in Starfield, a lot of the missions were go talk to this person, then go talk to this person, then follow me as I'll take you to the right person. And I found myself skim reading what characters were saying and just skipping through the dialogue, not even caring what dialogue selection options I was personally choosing.
Face. Oh, I suppose. I'm impressed.
Let me take the wheel.
It's too fast! How could you even tell what's on?
I can tell.
That is me though. You might enjoy and fully immerse yourself in roleplay into Starfield. And dude, if you are, you're gonna have a fucking blast with it. Now the game combat does feel like Fallout without the Pip-Boy, and it sort of is. So it all depends on how I guess you found that combat if you played Fallout. Now, while the score as well for the game is pretty cool, it is a little weird that there's no radio, or at least in my opinion. Fallout 4 had Diamond City Radio, which to this day I still listen to on Spotify. Skyrim has no radio because it's a fantasy game, and I think having some form of radio or music in Starfield would have been a great addition. Our characters do have sort of a space watch, and while we don't have to have it copied straight from Fallout to have a radio on our wrist, when I first saw the watch I went, fuck yeah, it's a space age Pip-Boy. The inventory and outfits available for the game too, they're kinda in my opinion. Now, as I mentioned, the game has a bit of an Alien or Alien Isolation old school 1970s space age styling to it, with some sounds and styles and all that sort of jazz. And that's true for the outfits. And I'm not knocking the outfits or anything like that, but I was a bit with how changing your outfit in the game works. Where here in Starfield, it's basically civilian clothes and spacesuits, and that's really it. No additional swap outs. You can swap out your helmet with the spacesuits, and that's really about it. Oh, and your backpack too, I guess. Personally, I would have loved to have gone down the road of sort of a outfit creator in a lesser version of, say, the shipbuilder. Like, my character's go-to outfit was this space poncho style, and it had this rebreather mask on the front and an air tank on the back. And it could have been cool if I could incorporate this poncho and its design into the spacesuit. Rather than wearing a more traditional style of spacesuit, I could have had this sort of armor followed by the poncho over the top, and that armor would have the rebreathing system onto it. But for, say, more extreme environments like ice planets or radiation planets, then I'd be forced into wearing more extreme outfits. Now, this is more of a personal note, not really a negative, but hey, do whatever you want with this information. I did also find some of the inventory systems a little confusing, determining what armor or weapon was better than others. That's not to say it's hard to understand, it's just not as simple as this weapon is better than this weapon. And thankfully, if you have become attached to a weapon, it can be upgraded with weapon benches and such, just like you can do with the Fallout games. But overall, am I enjoying my time with Starfield? The answer is yes.
Pretty good.
Pretty dang good, lads! Yeah!
But I'm also enjoying what I can do rather than what missions or story the game gives me, if that makes sense. I started my first character as a Han Solo, Malcolm Reynolds style, who had this bounty on his head, and then the game started with me as a miner, and it kind of worked for me to roleplay that my character was in hiding.
One day a man has everything, the next day he blows up a $400 billion space station, and the next day he has nothing. It makes you think.
No, it doesn't.
And after the main campaign mission started, I found myself getting bored of the go talk to this person and skim read everything, so I decided to randomly explore planets to constantly upgrade my ship, to steal items without getting seen, and to avoid bounty hunters, and Starfield let me do whatever the hell I wanted to do in this vast galaxy. Would I recommend playing Starfield? Well, the answer is yes, but with being on a Game Pass system too, if you've already got Game Pass, then there's no real reason you shouldn't check it out, at least in my opinion. And if you don't have Game Pass and you're unsure whether you should check out Starfield, well, if you like the idea of Skyrim in space and that sort of tickles your fancy, well, there's your answer.
Yep, there's your answer, Fishbulb.
Well.
But whether you want to be Buzz Lightyear and a space ranger, or you just want to explore the universe at your own pace, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.